going, I've got the list of things we're gonna talk through. So,
Yeah.
Zane, thanks for taking some time to chat. What's this all about? What are we
Well,
doing?
first, thanks for you reaching out. I was pretty excited when I saw that because I've, sort of had the same thing brewing in the back of my head for a while. Just like, there's got to be some other accountants that can just have a conversation. And, I think that's what we're going to do today. We're going to have a conversation. I think the focus for us on this sort of first round of conversations is we both have an accounting business, like accounting practice, an accounting firm, whatever we want to call it. But both of our businesses look very, very different. And the route to that business looks extremely different. We both took a different path to get here. We're both focusing on extremely different areas in terms of our niche clients. And then we have very different types of business in terms of size and the way we do things.
And yeah, as I was even thinking about this conversation ahead of time, I think something that, to your point, we both have these accounting firms, we both have these businesses, and from the outside looking in, you can assume that, oh well, every accounting firm is the same, or everything does the same type of thing. And most of the time people think accounting firm, they think, oh, we do taxes, or we do whatever else like that. And it's like, no, it's actually, it can be very different depending on where your passions lie, where your strengths lie, and really what you're hoping to get out of it too, or also just where you are in your journey. Because you've got a few more years ahead of me. So it looks a little different. So
calling me old right at the start of this conversation is fantastic.
You're many years young at heart, right?
Yeah. I mean, it is always interesting because people do make assumptions. When I was in South Africa and I told people I worked at KPMG, they just assumed I did audits, right? Which was right for a big portion of my career there, because that's the route you go. Where if you tell people you have an accounting firm in the US, they're like, oh, so you do taxes,
right?
And like neither of those answers are correct on what I do right now. And it's always interesting that there are those assumptions that is what people do if they do accounting. I think if you're working for a company, you'd be like, oh, I'm a CFO, I'm a controller. People understand that as well. But the idea of I have an accounting business, that's lost on a lot of people. They don't really know what that means.
That's right. So speaking of South Africa, do you want to maybe just kick us off with a little bit about your history, your story, how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so born and bred in South Africa. Spent most of my life in Port Elizabeth. Before I moved to the US, we were in Cape Town. That's where my wife was from. She was working for a winery there. I was working for a technology company. That winery happened to be owned by Americans. They really liked working with her. They needed a CFO. They offered her a job. We said yes. And we came over. That was 10 years ago. I'm just short of 10 years now, about a month and a half, and I'll be here for 10 years. When I first got here, house husband, hanging out, super fit, exercising twice a day. Life was good. Started eventually working for the same company. I was brought in more on an FP&A type role, long-term projections. I talk long-term, like 25 to 30-year projections, because you're buying a piece of land and how long will it be before it is a functioning winery? And then what would that exit strategy look like? Quickly within that job spec, we realized, well, it's great. There's not that much modeling for you to do. A lot of these models look the same, but we don't have anybody do any accounting for these businesses. We didn't like what we saw in the marketplace. So we decided, hey, we'll just start our own business. And that's how the concept of Protea Financial came about. Winery investment. So we started in the wine world. That is where we niche at the moment. But a little bit different in terms of that we've been fully remote since day one. So it's not part of the new cool craze from 2020. We've been doing it for a long time now.
You were doing it before it was cool.
Very much before it was cool. And then additionally to that, we have offices in 2 countries, where the head office is here in California. And then we have an office down in South Africa in my hometown of Port Elizabeth, where we hire a bunch of really smart accountants to help us get the work done.
That's super cool. Yeah. And I think probably one of the very first things when we first met is I noticed the accent and I was like, where are you from? I think that was like one of the first questions I asked you when we hopped on our first call. This is like a year or so ago. And you're like, South Africa. I was like, I knew it. I knew it had to be somewhere else. Anyway,
Yeah. It's a
um,
little broken right now with that. It's semi-Californian, semi-South African.
right.
I'm pretty much an accent nomad at this point.
That's how that goes. That is how that goes. Well, I don't know if anybody can hear from my accent, but I'm from Minnesota, which you might not be able to see in the background, but I have a nice big map of Minnesota. Born and bred here in the Midwest. And so I like it cold. It's actually not true. I don't enjoy it cold. In fact, I'm looking forward to when we move, if and when we get to move. Both my wife and I are like, we want to go somewhere that's warmer, preferably, maybe even overseas. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's really interesting. But tell us a little bit about your practice and how you got to the point where you are right now.
Yeah. So one of the things I love to talk about is my journey into entrepreneurship, because I think the entrepreneurial journey is what shapes a lot of why I do what I do and why I'm headed the direction I am. So I like to start with talking to people about my first year in community college, no, second year in community college. And I was just like bored out of my mind. So I was full-time college student, working 20 hours a week at the local coffee shop and still just not challenged enough. And so one day when I was having breakfast with my brother, I'm like, dude, what if we just start a business together? Right. And he was on board. So I was like, great, let's make this happen. At the time, I was into the hobby of photography, photography in particular. He was the designer. And so we're like, well, let's just start a photography design business. Let's make this happen. And we did pretty well for, a hobby business. I think at our most, we made $30,000 in one year. So that was really fun. I think what I've discovered from that is the doing of the photography wasn't the thing that got me really excited. It was coming alongside him and supporting him in his journey. Somebody who's great at their craft, who just needs a little bit of extra support to be really successful. I was like, this is super life-giving for me. I really enjoy it. So that was like the seed that was at the core of, what became this broader, desire to get into entrepreneurship. I knew at that point I was either going to be an entrepreneur or I was going to be helping entrepreneurs. Little did I know I would be doing a little bit of both, being an entrepreneur and helping entrepreneurs. So for me, it was never a question of if I was going to get into entrepreneurship. It was a matter of when. But I also knew that the best thing I could do is learn from the big boys, get into corporate America, and just learn as much as I possibly can. So spent 2 years in public accounting, transitioned and did corporate America for 6 or 7 years or so. Learned a ton, got a lot of great experience, met amazing people in the process. But in 2021, I was like, now's the time. Now is the time for us to get out and start the business. And so that's what I did. I left. I did some contracting work while I was building up my business. And then October of 2022 is when I went full-time into building Equip, which is the business that I have right now. So we specialize, I know we're going to get into this in a little bit, but you specialize in wineries and we specialize in custom software development agencies, which we'll unpack in a little bit, but I love it. I love working with these people. They're very entrepreneurial people, a little nerdy, and totally my type of nerdy. And I enjoy that.
Yeah, it's such an interesting story as well, and I think one of the things that you didn't really touch on there is also your sort of passion for teaching and educating people. And I know that becomes a big underlying foundation in, I think, what both of us find common ground on as well, right?
That's right.
So I know part of it, before you went full time, there was a part of it as well, trying to educate people.
That's right.
Would you like to share a little bit more on sort of that part of the business?
Yeah, I'm glad that you touched on that, because even the name Equip, ACCQUIP, it's accounting equipping. So yeah, it's based on this premise that we want to be really first and foremost in the business of empowering visionaries and teaching them the language of business. So I think even my personal mission statement, I don't have it on hand, but it is about education. It is all about helping people to discover more, and doing that through education and creativity and joy. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm kind of a quirky, creative individual. But yeah, I think, earlier on when I was starting this brand, I focused primarily on the education piece. So I have a course that's out there. Shout out to the tax ready freelancer course. It's free. Anybody can go and take that. It's about 2 hours. Teach you the basics of how to do bookkeeping in your business. But yeah, long term, that's kind of what my aim is. Like, I love the idea of doing an apprenticeship program, coming alongside people who are maybe non-traditional folks who are entering the accounting and bookkeeping space who want a little bit more support. Yeah, so we're not sure exactly what it's going to look like, but it's going to involve something teaching related for sure.
Yeah, and we're sort of in the same place, right? We also have Protea Academy, which sort of focuses on the education side, where at the moment it's really, there's a goal, but there's no real roadmap on what that goal looks like. So we know we want to be able to put out content that anybody can click on to listen to, learn a little bit, and understand the accounting world a bit more.
Mhm.
And we don't know what it's going to look like either. Maybe there's some courses in the future. Maybe there's some how-tos, some basics to help those people as well. There's non-traditional people, which there's a lot of it, right? As we specialize in QuickBooks, we know it's an easy entry point. So there's a lot of people that are finding accounting late in life and want to change careers, and they need some guidance, and they truly need the guidance. Like, I'm happy to help them. We don't want to give the accounting profession a bad name. These people have all the motivation, they have that entrepreneurial flair, so let's give them the guidance to do it. So I'm also sort of in that same place. Like, we want to teach people, we want to help people learn, but I don't quite know what it looks like yet. And maybe we'll know in a short period of time. But for now, we're just having fun putting out content so that people can listen. We've got this new section called Listen and Learn, where literally you just have to put it on in the background. You don't have to watch anything. There's no pictures. There's just words, and people can absorb some of the good explanations that we have on profit and loss and a balance sheet and just the basic accounting terms, so that you can at least speak the lingo.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. So definitely shout out to that. Go check that out. I think that would be a great first starting point.